Good word, worship team. Thank you. I know it's nice when we have the whole, but I love the acoustic sets. It's just, you got the twin Taylors over there. I know they're not twins, but anyway, it is good to see you all. I only have 2 announcements. I know this was one finger. I only have 2 announcements. Feed My Starving Children is the last Wednesday of the month, and you can sign up in the back with Allison. And then my second announcement is we're having our annual meeting Sunday, July 21st after the service. It should not be a long meeting. We're just going to, approve the spending plan, which is basically this year's spending plan with the dates changed, because we're not really doing anything too crazy. But those are the announcements. And there is no children's Sunday school today because it's the summer. So children, enjoy church. I'll try to be as entertaining as I can. Well, anyway. So today my title is Sometime After This. I'm continuing in the series on the life of Joseph. We will be in chapter 40. Before we turn to the text, though, let's pray. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much that you want to be called our Father. It is not us trying to convince you to adopt us or that you should be our dad, but you are the one who comes after us. All the earth is the Lord's and all the people in it, and yet so many of us push you away and reject you and deny you and ignore you, and you keep coming after us. And I just want to say thank you. And I pray that this morning in this place, you come after us again. Like the shepherd who would not stop looking for the lost sheep until he found it. You know our hearts. You know our worries. You know our fears. You know our rebellions. You know the things that we want to do and can't do, or the things that we wish we would do and refuse to do. You know the things that hold us back, the things that we are stuck in. And you so love the world. And so I just pray this morning as we hear your word that we hear you. In your name, Jesus, for your kingdom and your glory, we pray. Amen. Well, as I said, my title today is Sometime After This. And I'm taking that title from the very first verse, the very first words of chapter 40. Chapter 40, verse 1 says, and it came to... This is a different translation. And that's okay. No, I'll preach from this translation. In the translation I was expecting, the English Standard Version, it says, sometime after this. Sometime after this. Because we don't know how long this sometime was. This translation says, and it came to pass. I think this is the New King James Version, just based on that first sentence. Does anyone have a New King James Version Bible? Could you read and see if it is? This is just a fun game I like to play. Do you guys ever play Bible games? Oh yeah, no, here's a couple great Bible games. You open the Bible to a random place and you start reading out loud, and the other people have to guess where you're reading from. That's a fun game. And then there's the translation game. You start reading, and then they have to say, oh yeah, no, that sounds like, see, don't you wish you were my kids? You could have had so much fun. It's the New King James. So it's going to be, I'm just telling you, I'm not used to the New King James. It's going to be a little tougher sledding. We're okay. I'm prepared in the ESV or the NIV. One other game that I recommend you play with your kids, it's the Proverbs game. This was maybe my kid's favorite Bible game. And by my kid's favorite Bible game, I mean it was my favorite game and I made them play it. So there's 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs. And most books, I mean, most chapters have about 31 verses. So one kid would pick a number between 1 and 31, and then the other kid would pick a number between 1 and 31, and then we would go to that proverb. So one kid would say 26, and the other one would say 3, and then we go to 26:3, and then we would read it, and then I would say, what does that mean? Fun games. So much fun. Can't believe you guys don't play these. So anyway, the ESV says, sometime after this. And I like that it says sometime after this, because here's what we know about Joseph's timeline. By chapter 41, he is 30 years old. At the end of this chapter, he is 28 years old. We know that because in chapter 30, it says, now 2 years later. In chapter 37, when he's kidnapped, he is 17 years old. So this chapter happens somewhere between 17 and 28. I believe it happens very close to 28. And I believe that based on verse 4, because in the literal translation, it says some days after this. Now, other translations say sometime, or it happened. And the reason they say that is because not always are days in the Bible. But I think it's closer to days. And so here's the picture I want you to get. For 11 years, Joseph has been doing the right thing, not doing the wrong thing, serving his masters, even though one of them bought him as a slave and the other one is his prison guard, and he's been honoring God. He's been working his way up. Now you say, working his way up? Yeah, he was a slave and he worked his way up to the man who ran the house. Then he was a prisoner and he worked his way up to the guy who runs the prison, even though he's still a prisoner. That's how he has spent the last 11 years. Doing the right things, not doing the wrong things. He had every opportunity to be bitter and angry and mad. He had every opportunity to say, I deserve this. This isn't fair. I'm sure many, many times in the night, in the day, he's praying to God, saying, God, get me out of here. Get me out of here. You know I'm innocent. You know what my brothers did. Get me out of here. And why God chooses the times that God chooses, I cannot answer. No one can answer. There's an interesting passage in the book of Galatians. It says, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law. And theologians have debated what made the time that Jesus was born the fullness of time. And they say, well, the Greeks had come along. And basically after Alexander the Great, Greek was the language of the world. And then the Romans came along, and the Romans are famous for their highways. And so if you want the good news about your son to be carried throughout the world, what better way than to have a highway system and the same language? And I'm like, yeah, but he could have waited till today when there's the internet. Or maybe he could have taught Noah how to build roads instead of an ark. So when we don't know, we just try to make things up. The best illustration that I have, and it's what helped me understand the fullness of time better, was when my son was a child, little boy, 3, 4, he wanted spaghetti. So we're making spaghetti. We've got the pot, water's boiling, we got noodles in the water, we have a can of sauce, and he's like, can we add the sauce now? I'm like, no, why not? It's not time yet, we have to cook the noodles first. Okay. Can we add the sauce now? No, not yet. Why not? We have to boil the noodles first. If we add the sauce right now, we'll just kind of get some mushy, bad tomato soup with hard noodles in it. Okay. Can we add the sauce now? I'm like, he's not going to comprehend this at this age. I know when it's the right time. He doesn't. I can't explain it any better than I've tried. God knows the times. I don't. I don't know why he chooses the times that he chooses. I can't understand it. That knowledge is too wonderful for me. King David says, I do not bother myself with things too wonderful for me. I don't understand it. God does. What we need to do is trust that he knows what he's doing, even when it doesn't look like it from our perspective. And Joseph spends these years doing the right thing when it would have been so easy to want to do anything but the right thing. I mean, he could have been a bitter, grumpy, angry prisoner because he was unjustly accused. He was wrongfully imprisoned. He was stolen from his home by his brothers, sold as a slave. That's not fair. That's not right. And life has a way of making us angry. There's a Psalm 140, and David is talking about, and he says, save me from the men who are constantly making wars. And here's a funny thing about human beings. We are constantly making wars. John Lennon wrote the song, Imagine. Imagine there's no country, no religion too, nothing to live or die for. Here's the problem. It's not the country that makes people fight. It's not religion that makes people fight. It's something in them. We are just fighters. We want to be right. We want to get our way. We want to be smarter than everyone else. Anyone who's not doing, my son told me, anyone who's not driving at the exact same speed you are driving is doing it wrong. Because if you come behind someone who's going too slow, you're like, come on, get out of the way, I got places to be. And if someone zips around you on the freeway, what's wrong with them? They're in a hurry. Because the only one who knows how to do everything right is you. And Joseph didn't live by that. He did the right thing. He honored God. And this is a principle of God. You reap what you sow. But it's true even if you are apart from God. As far as I know, Tom Brady is not a believer in Jesus. Now, I hope he is. I would love to find out he is, because I don't want anyone to perish without Jesus. But for those of you who don't know who Tom Brady is, he's known as the greatest quarterback of all time, maybe the greatest football player of all time. He's won 7 Super Bowls more than anyone all time. He's played in 10 Super Bowls more than anyone of all time. In fact, he won 6 Super Bowls with what is thought of as the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. And then the next year, he went to a completely different team with a completely different coach, completely different roster, and he won the Super Bowl with them. And people are like, he's Tom Brady. What are you going to say? Tom Brady's 40 years old. He says, yeah, I want to play till I'm 45. Everyone's like, play NFL quarterback till you're 45. He's 45, he retires. They're like, yeah, I guess don't doubt Tom Brady. So now, Tom Brady's going to become a color commentator for Fox Network. Now, some of you would say, what are you talking about? Well, when you watch football, there's the guy who says, like, Kirk Cousins drop backs to pass. He throws the ball across the middle, incomplete. And then the next guy says, so the safety dropped back on this, and he saw Kirk's eyes, and he cut over to the middle, and he was able. That's the color commentator guy. Chris Collinsworth, I know it's a lot of names for those who don't know football. It's a lot of names for those who do. Chris Collinsworth has been doing the Sunday Night Football color commentary for years. And he's one of the best. And Tom Brady reached out to him because Tom spent the last year, Fox wanted him to go to work right away. He says, oh no, I need to prepare. So he took a year off, and he's been talking to all these other color commentators, asking them, tell me, what do I need to learn? What do I need to know? Chris Collinsworth says, Tom, we've been watching you for years, just wondering, what does he see that no one else sees, that allows him to do what no one else can do? Just watch the game and tell us what you're seeing. Not good enough for Tom. Not only does he do all of these interviews, okay, now this, just follow the math here. The NFL season is 18 games total. There's the preseason, there's the playoffs. If a guy does every one of those games, let's say he's going to call 24 games, most 30. Sometimes they'll do a Thursday night and a Sunday. 30. 30 games is a full-time job for an NFL color commentator. Chris Collinsworth said, and he may have been exaggerating, in the last year, Tom has done 1,000 practice games. It's like, dude, you already know more than anyone else. You're already better than anyone else. Just tell us what you see. You don't have to watch old games and practice. Yes, he does, because that's who he is. And what made him great in one thing is what makes him great in everything. And Joseph, I tell you that story because that's what Joseph was doing. It wasn't watching football games. He was living the right way. He was doing the right things. He was serving his master. He was being faithful. He was honoring God. And yes, did he want to be free? Of course he did. And how many times did he pray, God, set me free? I can't tell you. But while this time was passing, he continued to be who he needed to be. And because he continued to be who he needed to be, when it was his time, he was ready. And this is what we need to be doing. How you do anything is how you do everything. Jesus said, he who is faithful with little will be faithful with much. He who is faithful with little will be faithful with much. This isn't just wasted time, even though so many times we feel like it's just wasted time. And after these things, all of these days, all of these nights, the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth. See, that's how you know it's King James. Pharaoh was wroth. It's not an IRA. Pharaoh was angry against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers, and he put them in the ward in the house of the captain of the guard. Now, Potiphar was known as the captain of the guard. Because they don't use the name Potiphar, it seems like this is a different captain of the guard. This is the captain of the guard that Potiphar puts his prisoners with, because Joseph is with this captain of the guard. He put them, Pharaoh put the baker and the cupbearer in the ward of the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. Now here's what God did. This. Because you see, Joseph couldn't decide which prison he got to go to. He didn't want to go. Joseph couldn't decide which prison Pharaoh was going to put the baker and the cupbearer in. But God was using these things. He was orchestrating these things so that when God gave Pharaoh a dream, another thing that only God could do, because Joseph can't give Pharaoh a dream. Joseph can't create a famine. Joseph can't send 7 years of abundance. God was doing all of these things. Joseph's job was just to sit there and rot, except he wasn't rotting. He was growing. He was becoming. He was forging his character. And then it happened that the baker was thrown in prison, and the cupbearer was thrown in prison, and it was the same prison that Joseph was in. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them. This is interesting, because if you're the captain of the guard, you're in charge of Pharaoh's prison, and he puts two of his closest confidants, and you say closest confidants, Yeah, because the job of the cupbearer was to make sure nobody poisoned Pharaoh. I'm thinking he's going to trust him. And the baker, yeah, if someone poisons the muffins, bad business decision, baker. So these two guys are trusted by Pharaoh. And now they're put in prison, and it just so happens that it's the same prison that Joseph is in. And the captain of the guard, he is most likely going to want them to have a good report when they go back to Pharaoh. I mean, he doesn't know if they're going to be in there for life or if they're going to be there a couple days. So if you want to make sure that Pharaoh is happy with the job you're doing as the captain of the guard, you're going to put your best man in charge of these two. And his best man was Joseph. So he gave Joseph charge, and he ministered unto them. He served them. And how easy would it have been to be like, yeah, welcome to my world. I've been here for 11 years. I didn't do anything wrong. I hope you have a miserable time. I hope your nights are sleepless. I hope the rats eat your feet. Well, it was an Egyptian prison. It probably wasn't quite as nice as the ones we have in America today. And I'm not saying they're fun. I mean, I've never stayed, but he could have been so, but instead he ministered to them. He served them, and they continued a season in the ward. Now these words, continued a season, that's where literally it says, and they were days. That's why I think it's a shorter time, but it was some time. They continued a season. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt who were bound in prison. And God did this because Joseph couldn't make them have a dream. God gave them a dream. I mean, God interrupted their brain in the middle of the night and gave them a dream because he had a plan, and it was for the good of Israel, and he was using Joseph. And these two men had their dream, and Joseph came in unto them in the morning because this was his job, and he could have been grumpy, fussy, mean, here's your oatmeal, or whatever they ate in Egypt back then. But that's not who he is. That's not who he's practiced being. He has done the right thing. He's been faithful. He's been loyal. He's been honest. He's been kind. He's been gracious. He has served day after day after day after day, and it's not going to change today. He came in unto them in the morning, and he saw them, and behold, they were sad. And he didn't make fun of them, and he didn't mock them. He asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward in his master's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sad today? That's what people say all the time. Wherefore ye wore the blue shirt? Wherefore ye look so sad today? And they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. Now, if they were out free, Pharaoh has magicians and wise men. And when he had a dream, he called his magicians and wise men. They can't call the wise men and the magicians. They're in prison. They had a dream. They don't know what it means. There's no one to interpret it. Joseph is like, do not interpretations belong to God? You don't need a man. You need God. Tell me your dream. Tell me. And now, how did he know God was going to give him the interpretation? I think this is that years of building the relationship with God, that friendship with God. There's a book, Praying Like Monks, Living Like Fools. And in the book, he talks about how the three inventions that have distracted us the most are the clock, the light bulb, and the iPhone. And now we don't have time to be quiet. We don't have time to think. We don't have time to pray. Apparently, in 2019, they studied the iPhone, and the average person touches their phone over 4,000 times a day. That's a lot of phone. That's a lot of phone. Joseph didn't have the iPhone or the light bulb or the clock. What do you do when you're in prison by yourself? I'm assuming you probably do a lot of praying. And so he knew, something in his spirit knew, tell me your dream. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. So picture the vine. And in the vine there were 3 branches. And it was as though it budded, and its blossoms shot forth, and clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. So to me, have you ever seen those movies where like they super speed like a kernel of corn, and they plant it and it's like, and all of a sudden it's a full corn? He's like, a full corn, that's not even the right word. I'm from Wisconsin, we just call it a full corn. So it's like I saw a vine, there were branches and blossoms and clusters and grapes, and whoa. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within yet 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head, and restore thee unto thine office, and thou shalt give Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. He's like, in 3 days, you're going to become the butler again. You're going to be restored to your position of power. And then he has a request. And he makes this request to the cupbearer, which makes me think he had made this request to God many, 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 many times. He says, but have me in thy remembrance when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me in the dungeon. He's like, when you're back in your position, please remember me. Tell Pharaoh about me. Tell Pharaoh, I interpreted your dream. I've done nothing wrong. I was kidnapped. I didn't do anything wrong to get thrown in this prison. You're my friend in high places. Remember me. And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, 3 baskets of white bread were on my head, and in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked good for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within yet 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler again to his butlership. And he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Now, as I've been thinking about this, one of the things that struck me was that Joseph told the baker the truth. You see, how many of us would want to say, your dream me, for the next 3 days, you should just have as much fun as you can. just enjoy life. He didn't. He told him the truth. He told him, here's what your dream means. In 3 days, Pharaoh is going to hang you, and the birds will eat your flesh. And that, I'm assuming, was not a really happy message for the baker to hear. But I think there's two very good reasons, or two good principles we can learn from Joseph telling him the truth. First is, for the baker's own good, he knew what was coming. The baker had 3 days to get ready to meet his Creator. And hopefully, he used those days, and he was like, hey, Joseph, you seem to kind of have a connection with God. I'm about to meet him. Help me. What do I need to do? What does he want? How can I make things right? What can I do? Now, maybe the baker was like, yeah, that's what your interpretation is. We'll see. Maybe he didn't care at all. But Joseph told him the truth. The second thing, and I think this may even be more important than the fact that the baker had 3 days to get ready, it gave Joseph credibility. Because if he would have just said, your dream's a little hard to understand, just enjoy prison. And then the cupbearer goes back and Pharaoh has his dream and no one can interpret it. The cupbearer would say, when I was in prison, there was this young Hebrew man and the baker and I had a dream and he got one of them right. 50% might be worth a shot. No. Joseph told the truth. And when the cupbearer told Pharaoh, he said, the baker and I both had a dream on the same night. And he gave us the interpretation of both dreams, and both dreams happened exactly as he said. And we need to be people who speak the truth. Because first, the world needs to hear the truth, and second, they need to know that we are credible. The world needs to, and you see, increasingly, we are in a world that doesn't want to hear the truth, that actually denies there is truth, or says, that's your truth, I have my own truth. The problem with all of that is there's only one truth. The way to succeed in life, Henry Cloud says this, but I'm sure it's not original with him, you must be connected to reality. And he uses the example of people who go on American Idol thinking they can sing and they can't. And they're up there and they're like, oh, it's beautiful. And they're like, stop. Like, you can't sing. Yes, I can. No, I'm sorry, you can't. I am a very good singer. Who told you? My mother did. Thanks, Mom. Maybe a little more honesty. Now, I'm not saying you have to crush their hopes and dreams. So the Wright brothers, there was some math principle you can look this up. I read the book, but I get the ideas but it's like the Bernoulli principle or something about lift and drag and aerodynamics and math and blah, blah, blah. So the Wright brothers are using this, and they can't get off the ground. And then they come to the realization his math was wrong, which was kind of scary because this was a well-respected mathematician. And then they had to redo all of the math. And when they redid the math, they could fly. It was not until they were connected to reality when it comes to lift and drag that they could fly. And as long as people are disconnected from the truth, they will not find success in life. And right now, if seriously, if you would have told your grandpa the confusion there would be about sexuality and identity and what's this and what, they would just be like, come on, stop joking with me. That's crazy talk. And yet, this is where we are. And people aren't going to find fulfillment because just like the Wright brothers with the wrong math, you can't get there from here. You can't get there from here. And in a world that is supporting them and telling them, this is good, you're doing a good thing. Oh, yes, express yourself, find out. They're going to come to the end, and if no one said, you know what, here's the truth, they're going to think there is no answer. And there is no hope. Because I've tried everything. And I love quoting secular songs because they prove my point. Kathy, I'm lost, I said, though I knew she was sleeping. I'm empty and aching, and I don't know why. The last thing I remember, I was headed for the door. I had to find a passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the watchman. We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. These aren't my words. This is where people live. It's despair. It's hopelessness. And they don't know that they are created in the image of God and that He so loves them. He so loves the world. I heard about, and I don't know if it's true, but I heard about some kids in this area who are identifying as raccoons, and I was sharing this with one of my mentors, and he says, don't you think there's some demonic influence that they leave the image of God to become a rodent? I'm like, yeah, why would you give up this? I mean, David says, when I look at the heavens, the stars, the sun and the moon, your handiwork, I think, what is man that you are mindful of him? And man is his baby. We are made in his image. And that is amazing. And it's confusing. And it's wonderful. And how does he love you so much? I don't know, other than it's who he is. He so loves the world. And when he says he so loves the world, he doesn't mean the dolphins or the whales or the trees, and he loves those things. But he's talking about you. He's talking about me. He's talking about the homeless person. He's talking about the kid who's been in 5 foster families because nobody cares. He's talking about the guy who's working overnight because he lost every job he's ever had and now he's just at a convenience store. And I'm not putting down convenience stores. My son works at one. I'm just saying, he so loves the world. And if every one of those people knew, you matter. You are made. You are holy. And I don't mean everything we do is holy. I mean, human beings are sacred. That's why we call it the sanctity of life. It's the sacredness of life. It's the holiness of life. And we're in a world where they say, you're nothing. You can be whatever you want because nothing matters. And there is no maker and there is no creator. And somebody needs to say, hey, I have to tell you, here's what your dream means. We need to be people of the truth. And even if the people that we tell it to don't listen, it will give us credibility. So there was a study done. They had one person dress in a complete white costume. His face was covered, everything. Another person dressed in a completely black costume, face covered and everything. They put them in a cage with a monkey. And the one person would only play with the monkey. Every time the monkey came over, he would play and tickle and if the monkey ever tried to hug him, he would push him away and keep playing. The other person would never play with the monkey. He would only hug the monkey. Every time the monkey came to him, he would hug the monkey. Well, eventually the monkey figured out, that guy's kind of boring. I'm going to hang out with the guy that likes to play. And then they would introduce scary things in the cage, scary noises, other things like that. And when that happened, guess where the monkey went? He ran to the guy who was going to hold him. And I know people believe, Billy Joel wrote it, I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints, because sinners are much more fun. Yeah, for a while, until things happen, until you get scared. And if people don't know that you are a person of integrity who will tell them the truth, where will they go? So may we do the right thing. May we be the right thing. May we use these times that seem like just passing days to grow in our relationship with God so that his thoughts become our thoughts and his words become our words. Because Jesus said, "For this reason I was born and came into the world, to give witness to the truth." Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this story. I thank you for these words. I thank you that it gives us hope. I thank you that it teaches us. And I know the cupbearer forgot Joseph, and he was there for 2 more years. And we may feel like that right now, but help us to remember, help us to trust. Help us to remember what you did for Joseph, what you've done for Moses, David, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Obadiah, Elijah, Elisha. It's who you are, and you are faithful. So we say thank you, and help us, Jesus. In your name we pray, amen.